that you're here this beautiful morning. Could I remind you please to turn your cell phones off or turn the audio off or whatever magic you have to perform on that technology to get it not to interrupt. Thank you. I'm Holly Curley. I'm the facilitator this morning. Connie Otteson is our speaker. She has a wealth of knowledge to share with us about places, 5 places in Idaho Falls that we all know and probably really don't know much about. We just look at them and take them for granted. Connie has researched a lot of Idaho Falls and Bonneville County's history. She's the author of 4 published books that are over here for your perusal, and she'd be more than willing to sell them to you afterward. Probably sign them too if you smile at her nicely. In 2008, along with Mary Jane Fritzen, who many of you probably knew, she helped organize the Bonneville County Heritage Association to commemorate Bonneville County's centennial in 2011. She's a longtime member and officer of the Idaho Writers League. Connie was twice named their Writer of the Year and received the Lifetime Achievement Award from them. She and her husband Dennis were both born here in Idaho Falls, so they are real natives. Attended Idaho Falls High School, and they've been married 53 years. They have 4 children, 16 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. They do a lot of traveling, and have their next trip at the end of this month is going to Dubai, Jordan, Israel, and Egypt. So they're packing again. So I will give you Connie. I'm sure she'll be open to questions at the end of the presentation, I hope, since I just said that. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Can you all hear me? If you ever can't hear me, please raise your hand. I've been where you are, and it's no fun if you can't hear the presenter. So please indicate to me if you can't hear.
I don't think the microphone is working.
I agree.
So, you know, I turned it on, and then it's off. Is this better now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I can hear that it's different, so. Thank goodness, because it's really miserable to be up there and not be able to hear. So be sure and let me know anytime if you can't hear, if I'm turning the wrong way or whatever. By the way, my books are really cheap today, so no kidding. So yeah, I'm glad to share them with you because there's a wealth of information in them. Well, I entitled the presentation, Jewels of Idaho Falls. I really think we are in a beautiful city. As Holly said, Dennis and I travel all over the world. And I just think Idaho Falls is the most beautiful city we've ever been in. And the city takes such good care of its facilities. And we'll be looking at some of those places here on the slides today. This is from the Idaho Falls website, and they say they have 57 parks. It only shows 33 on here, but I think they're counting all of the places that they take care of, the green places like the cemeteries and all. They say there's 57. And I've never been anywhere where it wasn't pristine and beautiful. So I'm just so proud of our city and what they do for us. Okay, so we're going to talk about city parks, the 5 really historic parks with great stories. Which park do you think was the first park in Idaho Falls?
Cape Curley.
Not Cape Curley.
Tautphaus.
Not Tautphaus. Good guesses. So I've asked my friends this, and I tell them, and they say, "Where's that?"
Highland.
In case you don't know where Highland Park is, this might be a reminder here. It's right next to Melaleuca Field. And Highland Park used to cover a lot of area, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of our oldest park in the city, Highland Park. It was actually established in 1882. So that's the earliest park in the town. It was founded by this man. His name was John Lindgren. And let me just tell you John's story for a minute. He was born in Sweden. And when he was 18 years old, he left his parents and his siblings. He got on a ship to come to America all by himself. Of course, there were strangers on the ship. There were a lot of people on there, but he didn't know anybody when he got on that ship. And the great thing is that John Lindgren's granddaughter, she's passed away now, but when I was researching for my first book in about 2002, I contacted her. Her name was Vera June Lindgren Williams. So I went to Vera June's home, and she gave me a transcript of his handwritten diary from the time he left Sweden until the time he died here in Idaho Falls. So it's a gold mine for a historian to find a first-person source. That's just a primary source, that a person that really lived here, and the things that he says, I really believe. He's very articulate. I'll read a little bit about what he did in a minute. But anyway, John got on a ship, came to New York, made his way west in a covered wagon train, got out west and worked for a while in Utah and then down in Colorado and Nevada. He was trying to save up enough money so he could have his own place. And he just about had enough, and then somebody took advantage of him. He didn't speak the language well, and didn't understand business very well, and he lost everything. So here he was back in Salt Lake in a boarding house with no prospects and didn't know what to do. And someone told him, why don't you go up to Idaho? They're just taking the railroad up to Eagle Rock in Idaho. Well, everybody was talking about this new railroad that was coming to Eagle Rock. So that kind of appealed to John's sense of romance. So he got on a train in Salt Lake, and he rode the train as far as Blackfoot, which at that time was the terminus of the railroad. They were laying track up to Eagle Rock. This was 1879. But it hadn't got to Eagle Rock yet, so he took his stuff, put it on his back, and walked the rest of the way to Eagle Rock from Blackfoot. I just can't even imagine doing that in our day, but he was a guy that nothing got in his way. So you can imagine what he saw when he got to Eagle Rock. He saw Eagle Rock's first bridge. This was built in 1866. Matt Taylor erected this bridge. And I always thought this was the oldest picture. This was taken by William Henry Jackson when he came through this area in 1871 with the Hayden expedition. They were on their way up to Yellowstone Park to take the very first pictures of the park, the famous waterfall and the pictures of the Tetons. So I always thought this was the oldest picture taken in 1871. And when I was doing research for this program, you can always find new stuff in research. I found a new picture that I'd never seen before. This was taken in 1868. It says by C.R. Savage. I don't know the story behind that. I need to look into it. But I was thrilled to see that picture because it's a little bit better picture with a better resolution than the one that we have. Well, when John Lindgren, back to his story, got here, and he went and he met the Anderson brothers. If any of you remember Mary Jane Fritzen, this was her favorite topic, the Anderson brothers. She gave many presentations here about these two brothers. Their story is that they were brothers-in-law of Matt Taylor. Matt was married to their sister. So as soon as Matt Taylor got his bridge just barely ready to open, he contacted his brothers-in-law in Missouri and said, you should come to Eagle Rock because we're going to make a lot of money here with this toll bridge that I'm putting in. So both brothers at different times came and settled here in Eagle Rock. And Matt Taylor left. He was only here for 3 or 4 years and he was gone. He's given credit for starting the community, but these men stayed and built it up. They promoted Eagle Rock until it became Idaho Falls in 1891. So, and then they stayed till the turn of the century. So these men, I really consider them the founders of Eagle Rock. So anyway, John Lindgren went and talked to these brothers, and they had this store and bank and post office. And there wasn't much else here at that time. Let me read you what John said from his journal. I arrived in Eagle Rock afoot with my blankets on my shoulder on March 25th, 1879, with $5 in my pocket. I worked for Jack Anderson, and in town there were 3 houses, a boarding house, a hotel, and a blacksmith shop. At this time, the Utah Northern Railroad was building the abutment for the Iron Railroad Bridge to cross the Snake River. I started to work for Mr. Anderson for $1 a day and board. Then $40 a month as gatekeeper to his toll bridge. By May 27th, the terminus of the railroad got here. Great trading outfits would pass through to Montana over our toll bridge. In less than a week, a mushroom town sprang up with some 100 houses, tents, and wagons. I went one day and counted 2,700 freight wagons waiting to cross the bridge. I would take an average of $400 in tolls a day. In about 6 weeks, this host of teams, tents, and houses left for Camas. I made this place of Eagle Rock the subject of wonder. A week ago, some 3,000 people were busy, and today, August 15, 1879, only 3 families were left to stay. Jack Anderson, Dick Chamberlain, and the section house family. I was now getting $50 per month. Mr. Anderson persuaded me to cook for him, for his clerks, and others who might board there, which I did. So John wasn't afraid to do anything. He even started to cook for the Andersons. He worked pretty hard for the next few years, and in 4 years, he had enough to buy some land. And he said he bought this 155 acres for $750 just above town on Willow Creek, and he named the property Highland Park because it reminded him of his Swedish homeland. I tried to research where Highland would be in Sweden, but I couldn't find it, but apparently that resonated with John, and so he called his park Highland Park. So it was 155 acres. I'm going to show you a minute a map that his granddaughter gave me. And this map isn't even complete. So right here, where the red pointer is, it says Rock House. John built an adobe house right there, and that's all there was. As you can see, this is Willow Creek that comes down here. And he used that to water this garden space. So at first he just had a garden and the adobe house that he built. After a few years, he built another house, which I'll show you in a minute. But I'm just fascinated by this map because this says this is a hayfield. He's got a haystack and a barn. He had all kinds of animals. He had horses and cows and chickens, and he sold eggs and milk and meat in town and butter. He was a hardworking guy, and he still didn't have a wife. He couldn't find a wife in this little town with nobody here. What a surprise. Later on, he built this swimming hole that I'll show you in a minute. This was the deep end and the shallow end. It was long and narrow. And in the summer, people would wade and swim and play in it. And in the winter, they ice skated on it. So that was another thing that was watered by Willow Creek, which was a pretty much continuous, dependable source of water. John planted all these orchards and fruit trees, and he built a dance hall there, which I'll also show you in a minute. He had beehives, he sold honey, and he planted all these evergreen trees. In this area, he built a bandstand, which I've never seen a picture of. I have to find a picture of the bandstand. It's just an outdoor pavilion thing that the bands would come and play, and people would party there. Just wanted to make sure I got everything that... Okay, so his land goes... Today, it would be our Shelley Street, where it says Shelley Street. That was the borders of John's land. Today, it's Mound and Bannock Avenue on the east, and on the west, it would be Blaine Street. Out this way is the river. This road, Highland Drive, today wasn't there in that day, of course. 155 acres. This went clear down. The map ends here, but it went clear down to Memorial Drive. So 155 acres. Remember that initial investment of $750. We'll see how John continues to use that to support his family in the coming years. This is the second house he built, and well, Mrs. Lindgren gave me this, Mrs. Williams gave me this picture, and obviously there were a lot of other places there. Through the years, John started to sell off little lots and bits to homeowners that wanted to build a home. So I read all of his journal, and it doesn't really say how much he gets every time he sells things, but he sells things quite often, parcels of his land. So he had all the trees, and he was selling fruit and tree stock to the local citizens. He made money however way he could. This is where the end of John's property was where the courthouse sits today. Mrs. Lindgren, or Mrs. Williams, his granddaughter, told me that the Bonneville Courthouse sit on John's land, and I was kind of skeptical about that, so I had to go and research that, and I actually found the land record. At the time, this whole area was in Bingham County, so I had to go down to Blackfoot and look in these big books. It was pretty awesome. They let me read through these big record books in 1882, in 1890, when he sold that to the city. I found the land records, and that was really exciting to see the real record with John Lindgren selling this property to the town company. That's what the deed said. So back to John's story, there's his dance pavilion and a lot of his orchard, and you can see people sitting out picnicking. He invited the town to come to Highland Park and enjoy his land, which people did. They had a lot of gatherings there. There's a picture inside the dance pavilion. An old historian of the Idaho Falls area, William Hathaway, was a post-minister writer, and he wrote a couple of historical books. He said, Idaho Falls got its dance pavilion in October 1893 at Highland Park, built by former toll bridge gatekeeper John Lindgren. Church groups and organizations met at the dance pavilion and a bandstand in the middle of the park for picnics, reunions, and other get-togethers. Couples danced in the pavilion to music supplied by a wind-up gramophone. How cute is that? John also mapped out a baseball diamond on his lot. I think it's probably about where Melaleuca Field is now, but that was the very first baseball field. And just, local people would come in the summer and play baseball on a summer night, like country people like to do in those days. There's a picture of some bathing beauties in his lake. John still isn't married. Apparently these girls are probably pretty young for him because he's getting up there. By this time he still hasn't found a wife, and kind of would like to have one, but he can't find an eligible person to marry. Finally, when he was 50 years old, he went to Blackfoot and was doing business with this man, and he met the man's daughter, Letty Wilson, and within 2 months of John meeting Letty, they were married. So once he found his girl, he didn't waste any time, and of course she was young there, so she had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls in their marriage. And catch up with my notes here somewhere. Yeah, so they hosted many celebrations, reunions, weddings, holiday picnics, and other commemorations at their park. And John mentioned in his journal that Letty would often make fried chicken for the people that were coming, or homemade ice cream or lemonade. So they were very hospitable to people that wanted to come and picnic or have a party at Highland Park. The sad part is that they were only married for 21 years. John suffered a fall and had a concussion and died when he was 71. So this left Letty with all his property that he hadn't sold off yet. A couple of years later, I think in 1919, she sold the rest of the park for $7,200 to the city. So from his $750 investment, first of all, we know he got $5,000 for where the courthouse is. Letty got $7,200 for the rest of the park where the ball field is. So he really made that $750 grow and last and support his family through the rest of his life. When the city bought the property, they started to build some bleachers, but Russell Freeman said in one of his books, the first baseball game on May 19th, 1919 brought over 4,500 people who sat on the ground before the grandstands were built. Imagine 45 people around a ball diamond. That's pretty amazing. Shows there wasn't much to do, and that was a big deal. It wasn't until 1940, though, that the city brought professional baseball to Highland Park. When I was a girl, we loved to go to the ball games. I lived just, 3/4 of a mile from Highland Park, and my brother and I had walked there in the summer, just little kids. I was about 8, and he was 10, and we'd go and watch the ball games in the big grandstands there. We loved watching the Russets. The Russets played there for 21 years, and since then there have been 18 changes and 2 or 3 new grandstands built until Melaleuca Field today.
They did have professional teams. Who played at the first game?
Well, the first games, those were just the locals that just came to, they were just pickup teams from around the area, like probably Idaho Falls played Blackfoot or whatever. Yeah. Today, if you go to the park, it's a beautiful little place to picnic or just enjoy the day. There's where Willow Creek ran through it. Most of the time when I'm there, it's dry. I think there might be water in it in the spring. I haven't checked, but when I was a girl, there was water there all the time, and they had fishing derbies. There's a monument there to John that you can go read a little bit about him. And the city has this pavilion you can rent to have a little family gathering or picnic or whatever. So I really love Highland Park. It's close to my heart because I live around there. Today, as you can see, this is the green space in Melaleuca Field, and the city owns this area. And that's all that's left of John's legacy today. It's all homes and other things. His property came clear down here to Memorial Drive, so pretty impressive what he did with $750. The next park we're going to talk about, historic park that somebody mentioned earlier. I'm sure you can all tell the only park in town with 5 ball diamonds has to be Tautphaus Park, doesn't it? Just to get you oriented, this is South Boulevard, and this is Rolandette. This is the great aerial picture that the city has on its website. There's the tennis courts, and there's a ball diamond by South Boulevard. My grandkids have played in all these other 4. This is the one that's called the Sunken Diamond, and we'll talk about why that is in a minute. This one out here on the corner of Rolandette, where the park comes out, that used to be a rodeo ground. When I was a girl, we'd go there to the rodeo, to the War Bonnet Roundup, and it was so exciting to go there, but the parking was dismal, so that's why the city started Sandy Downs and turned this back into just a park. This area here is the zoo, and I want you to notice the street that comes through here in this aerial from South Boulevard down the side of the park. There's the hockey rink. And down here by the zoo, this road, if you haven't been out there lately, is closed off. I'll show you why in a minute, but the city has bought all this land out here from the Bonneville County, what do you call it? Extension office. They've moved, and so the city now owns all this land out here, and they say they're going to, out here, no, out this way, right? Yeah, they're going to expand the zoo out that way, so that's kind of exciting to watch for them. Okay, I want you to remember where the little canal comes through here. That's kind of important. It comes down, and you go down this road, and you cross the canal right there. So I want to tell you how that came about in a minute. So that's Tautphaus Park as we know it today. The man that founded Tautphaus Park, not surprisingly, is named, this is a monument just when you come in out here off South Boulevard and down this south entrance and come around here. If you ever want to go look at that monument, it was put in there by Jim Bennett and Nancy Henry. They researched a great deal about Tautphaus Park, and before he died, Jim Bennett wrote a 100-page history of Highland Park. This includes all the pictures that he put on. It's on the city's website. So if you go and see the 118-page history that Jim Bennett put on, it's quite amazing what he put on. And not surprisingly, the man that founded Tautphaus Park is Charles Tautphaus. It's actually named for a real person. He was born in Germany, immigrated to San Francisco. And while he was in San Francisco, he met his wife, Sarah. They got married in San Francisco and had 5 daughters. Well, Charles Tautphaus was a great businessman, so he made a lot of money in San Francisco in mining and freighting businesses. And he decided that even more money could be made up in Montana. So he and Sarah put the 5 girls in a covered wagon and moved to Butte in probably 1880. I'm sure that figures on the story, but I didn't get it. But anyway, they moved to Butte, Montana, where Charles made a lot more money. So he wanted to keep investing his money, and he heard about Eagle Rock, just like John Lindgren did. So he came down to Eagle Rock, and it was built up a little bit more when Charles got here, and that's the picture that the museum has for Eagle Rock Street. But here's a map that Jim Bennett left of how the layout of this in 1884 when Charles Tautphaus came to Eagle Rock. It was 1884, and this right here where it says Tautphaus Building, he bought this building for $3,000 and opened a meat market. So that wasn't the only thing he wanted to do in Eagle Rock, but he opened a meat market first. To get you oriented, this is Broadway out here. Here's today's library. Today this is the library parking lot, and it used to be called Eagle Rock Street, but back in 1884 it was called Railroad Avenue. As you can see all these railroad lines coming right through town. That's where they all came through at that time. There was a railroad depot here, and yeah, so the streets are pretty much the way you see them now. Today they're Capitol Avenue and Cliff, although Chamberlain doesn't start until Cliff here, and this is all Park Avenue today. So that was Charles's introduction to Idaho Falls, but he looked south to find some property. In those days, you could only buy 1 section of land per person. So Charles found 3 sections that he wanted to buy, so he got a buddy to buy 1 section, and Sarah bought the other, his wife. So this was Sarah's, this was the buddy, Mr. Moffett, and this was Charles Tautphaus, Charles Tautphaus' land. So and then he bought this extra land later. So at one time he owned 3 1/4 sections of land in prime South Idaho Falls area here. These canals that came here, Idaho Canal and the Butte Arm Canal, were not there. The only thing that came across Charles's land was Sand Creek came across somewhere here, and so he was going to use Sand Creek to water all of his property. He built a lake right about there, and he was going to fill the lake from Sand Creek. Well, Charles soon learned what all the natives already knew, is that Sand Creek goes dry every fall, and you can't count on Sand Creek back in the day. So Charles was left without any way to water all of this property that he bought. Well, probably Charles's greatest contribution was starting the Idaho Canal Company. So today it comes down through here, waters all of Charles's property, and then off of the Idaho Canal, he built this Butte Arm Canal to fill his lake and to water his property. He built a house somewhere around here and started farming all this. But his greatest contribution was when he started this Idaho Canal Company. I wrote a couple of stories in my books about him, and I've written stories for magazines about him, and I just quote what I read is that he started the Idaho Canal Company by taking the canal out of the river 12 miles up the river. I don't know why they went 12 miles up the river, but it was a good thing because now it waters all of this land in Coltman and beautiful farmland there because of the Idaho Canal. So Charles got some partners, and they capitalized the Idaho Canal Company for $500,000. And they got all these scrapers and all the things that they needed graded. They call them state-of-the-art graders. State-of-the-art in 1890, I guess. But they went up there and they got that canal dug. They had to build a diversion dam across here to funnel the water over to their canal. That canal goes all the way to the Blackfoot River. So quite an accomplishment that's a great legacy that Charles Tautphaus left to us. Well, like I say, I've written about this in some of my books, and I've never gone to see where it was. So one day this last spring, I said to Dennis, I've got to go see where that Idaho Canal comes out of the river. It can't be hard to find. I Googled it at home and got this map, and it was leading us up, out through Coleman and over. So we got in the car and with our GPS going and telling us which way to turn, and when it came time to turn somewhere, we couldn't because it was gated. All of this out here is beautiful homes and farms, and they're all gated. You can't go up to the river at all. We knocked on a couple of doors. Nobody was home. And I suggested to Dennis, let's just climb the fence and walk over there. He said, no, we can't do that. That's not a good idea. So my husband's a problem solver. We got in the car and came back here and went across the bridge here, and this is Bear Island. If any of you have been out there, there's beautiful homes. Maybe some of you even live out there. So I apologize to you that live out there. There's beautiful homes out there, and not all of them are gated and fenced. Some of them are just open, so you've got the beautiful view of the home and the river behind it. We drove down to about here. I'm not in any way suggesting that you do this. We shouldn't have done this. We were trespassing. We went and knocked on the door of a house that was right there where we could see, just right out there was the diversion dam and the canal head gates. We went and I rang the doorbell twice and banged on the door, nobody came. So I said, let's just go out and take a couple of pictures. And before I was done taking pictures, here comes the lady out of the house. And I heard you knocking, and I said, I'm so sorry, I just want to take a couple of pictures. She said, well, that's okay, but if my neighbor caught you, they call the police. So I felt very fortunate to get these pictures, and like they say, don't try that at home. So we got this picture of the Idaho Diversion Dam that comes across the river. Over here are the head gates to the Idaho Canal, and we did get a couple of close-up pictures. So there's the head gates to the Idaho Canal, and I thought, wow, that looks like it might be the original thing. Went home and looked in my files, and I was astonished to come across a story that I clipped in 2011 from the Post-Register, who knew that was going to come in handy. But there are those Idaho Canal head gates. The caption under the picture says, the original Idaho Canal River diversion head gates. These mortared lava piers still function at this location, which is about 12 miles north of Idaho Falls. They were constructed in the early 1890s. So isn't that amazing that those head gates have stood the test of, what is that, 130 years? Whatever it is, it's amazing. And there are obviously some people from that era standing on it. And I just really want to thank whoever took that picture back in the day. Maybe it was Charles had someone take that picture. Anyway, they brought the canal down to Eagle Rock. It turned into Idaho Falls in 1891. So by the time the canal got to Charles's property and filled the 6-acre lake that he had dug, it was Idaho Falls. So they filled the lake, and over the years, that lake was really well left and well used, like John Lindgren's lake, only this was much bigger. They say that they ice skated on in the winter and boated and swam in the summer. And not only that, there's an early postcard of people picnicking, and there's the lake back there in the background. There was a changing house. If you wanted to swim in the lake, there's a changing house there that they still use today for something else. They even camped around there. That's a really grainy old historical picture of the lakes back here. Imagine going out and pitching a tent at Tautphaus Park today. I don't think we're going to try that. We'd for sure get arrested. And there is a picture of the rodeo ground that was started later. I think in his day, Charles he had horses, and he built a track that he had racers. He trained jockeys to race, and then he'd send them off to Pocatello and different places to race, but that grandstand wasn't put in till later. The story behind that was that Charles also died an untimely death when he was only 65 years old. He died of pneumonia and left Sarah and the 5 girls with all of his property to dispose of. So she immediately sold most of the park to a group called can't pull it out of my head, the Idaho Falls Boosters Club. She sold that to them in 1909, and they owned it for just a few years, but they did build the grandstand and start the rodeo there. But apparently the boosters didn't have too many boosters because they had to sell it off in just a couple of years, in about 4 or 5 years, to a family called the Reno family, R-E-N-O. And the Reno family changed the name to Reno Park. And they really promoted the rodeo, and it got a lot bigger under their direction. I wrote a story once where a guy said that he actually went there and they were landing airplanes there at the rodeo ground. It was back in, I don't know, 1911 or whatever, when they'd barnstorm around the country. There was a plane that landed out there. Okay, the Reno family owned it till 1935 when the city bought it back from them. They kind of ran out of funds and interest in it, so the city bought it back, and for a while it was called City Park. And in 1943, by popular demand, they renamed it Tautphaus Park. So it's all in honor of the founder of the park. Today, this was the changing room, according to the histories that I've read. I'm not sure that it was that full building, or if they added, I think they might have added this part on, but I'm not sure. But in 1947, some businessmen got a lease to run a chicken restaurant and an amusement park. So at first this was a chicken restaurant. When I was a girl, they sold hamburgers, and there was a fireplace, of course, you can see, and tables around it, and dancing in the middle to jukebox. And that was a fun kind of teenage hangout when I was a girl. But now, of course, they do still sell some food there, and that's the nucleus of Fun Park right there. These investors that leased the ground from the city for an amusement park started to buy up amusement park equipment. The first thing they bought was the carousel. This carousel is historic. They bought it when it was brand new, and it was only one of 2 in the United States that's still in its original position. So this is a real jewel. It's an Allen Herschel carousel, and there are 20 others in existence in the United States, but there's only 2 in their original position. Also that same year in 1948, when they opened, they had a revolving airplane ride. When I was a little girl, I rode those, and we thought they were bombs. That turns out they're B-17 fuel drop tanks. So they had fuel in these in World War II. And they were World War II salvage, and obviously in 1949 when they built it. They also put in a little train. In my younger years, it was a smaller train, but the track went out further. And that one they bought from Italy and had it shipped over here, but it's kind of an antique, so they have it in storage now. The information I have is that the city has it in storage somewhere. And they put this new little train in 1990. Got a lot of pictures of my grandkids going around in that little train. It's pretty cute for little kids. They bought, from the Utah State Fair in 1949, they bought the Octopus. That wasn't operational till about the time I was in junior high, in the mid-50s. And they also bought, about the same time, they called this an Eli Bridge Company Big Wheel. They purchased it in 1948, but it wasn't operational until, probably the late 50s. I remember that was the most recent ride in the park, and it was a big deal when the Ferris wheel opened. And of course, then they later built the little mini golf course that wasn't there when I was a teenager growing up. I just need to talk about the zoo for a minute. The first zoo began in 1935 when the city bought the Reno Park from the Reno family. The superintendent of the zoo was a man called Al Heslop, and he and his family lived in the house there in Tautphaus Park while he was the zoo superintendent, or while he was the park superintendent. And he'd already had this little zoo and his property of wildlife on his property. So he moved it, got permission from the city to move it here, and that was the first zoo. It just had deer and elk and antelope in the first zoo. And when I was a girl, it was a pretty dismal place. The animals, were just in little cages, but wow, have they done a lot to that zoo. I had to go this summer. I hadn't been for probably 3 or 4 years. They have expanded so much. I thought I'll just go in and take a quick walk around. It'll take me half an hour. It took me over an hour, and I went pretty fast. So if you go, it's a really great place to just spend an afternoon or take your kids or your company there. It's a great zoo now, and they've just done so much for it. I saw in the paper the other day they just got a new accreditation from the Zoological Society, so they're doing great things. And right next to it, this is what's in the road. The road used to go through here. They dedicated this building in February of this year. I don't know if some of you might have heard of William J. Mayick. He worked out at the site and he ran an investment club. And my husband wishes now he got in on that because those people made a lot of money. And William J. Mayick made a lot of money. He was married, but they never had any children. And she's now passed away, and he lives in a retirement center, so he's decided to use a lot of his money to help the community. If you've noticed the Civic Auditorium, they've got a sign there thanking William J. Mayick Foundation. He donated a lot of money to the Civic Auditorium, and he donated $500,000 to build this education center, and there were some other donations that came in less significant than that. But he's a wonderful philanthropist for this area. I had to go in here that day I was at the zoo. I went in and talked to the girl at the desk. And she told me that it's a 4,500 square foot building, and it will be used to teach children and zoo patrons about conservation and the environment. In the past they've just had little groups sitting out at the zoo. It's been stormy weather, but here they can have people inside. It has 3 multi-use classrooms, office space, a break room with kitchenette, restrooms, and a storage area. I went in the restrooms, and they are the best restrooms anywhere. So, yeah, I think they'll let you go in there if they're open. And it's a beautiful facility. So, what a jewel, another jewel in the crown of Idaho Falls and their parks. The next park is the park that some of us thought was the first park, and that's Curley Park. This has quite a history. And a lot of people know, is it really named after somebody? Indeed, it is named after Kate Baker Curley. She and her husband Bowen came to Idaho Falls in the 1890s and settled here and built a house near where the park is today. Kate Curley started the Village Improvement Society. This was a group of ladies. I think at one time they had over 100 members. They banded together with the goal of securing the morals, dignity, and beauty of the city of Idaho Falls. And they did 3 different things I'm going to tell you about that indeed secured the morals, dignity, and beauty of Idaho Falls. They kind of pooled their money and they did a lot of fundraisers. And the first thing they did, they wanted a library in this town. And so they applied and got a $15,000 grant from the Carnegie Foundation and built, that's a very grainy early picture of the library. That's all there was when I was a girl, and it was so fun to go in there, and I spent many happy hours in there reading and perusing the books and studying, and it was a great facility for its time. Of course, the city outgrew that library, and now they moved it down to Broadway. And instead of just tearing it down and just making an ugly mess, what's the city done? They've built this beautiful Museum of Idaho, and added on here, they just barely dedicated the new wing. So, wow, I think Idaho Falls is just really on top of everything here. Okay, to beautify the area, of course, they wanted to build a park. They wanted this park in the middle of of a quiet community where people come and picnic and have a shady time there. And the Village Improvement Society ladies, when they decided they were going to build a park here, it was dirty, rocky, ugly, and they bought it for back county taxes, which I don't know how much that was, but they said it wasn't much. And then they started to have programs and all kinds of things to raise money so they could beautify the park. They thought, well, let's plant some potatoes and grow potatoes and sell those. Well, before they could plant potatoes, they had to dynamite the hard pan before they could even plow it. So these ladies were pretty tough women. Got to hand it to them. Today, of course, the park is full of, has some playground equipment, and we often go there with our family on the 4th of July weekend to have a picnic or just walk around the park. It's so beautiful. When the VIS, Village Improvement Society, VIS, got ready to dedicate the park, Kate Curley had passed away. They didn't finish the park till 5 years after she died. By this time, her husband, Bowen, was mayor, and he asked the VIS if they would please only plant hardwood trees in this park. So they sent for hardwood trees from Iowa, a big shipment of them, and they spread them around town and put some in the park. I think probably there's more than just hardwood trees there now, but that was when they dedicated the park in 1908. They dedicated it to Kate Curley. So that makes you proud of what the pioneer women did in the city. And yeah, I spend a lot of time there, and it's a really great place to go. The next park we're going to talk about used to be an Indian campground. Now, this is not actually a picture of what it looked like then, but it could have. But the history said that it was an Indian campground. They found a lot of Indian arrowheads. And here's another clue to help you know what park we're talking about. It used to be the city dump. This is not a picture of our dump. I got this off the internet, but I couldn't find anybody that took a picture of the city dump back in the day. Who does that? So, any guesses what this park is? Freeman. Yeah, you all know this is Freeman Park, just south of where we are here. Amazing what they did. When I was a girl, this was a city dump. And then now the city's made this beautiful park. It was back in the 50s. They decided, well, this is probably not the place for a dump. Every night we could look over and see garbage burning. There'd be smoke rising. We just lived a mile away, and sometimes if it was black smoke, you know, they were burning tires. So this was not good for the city to have this here. I think Jim Freeman was on the city council, and he kind of spurred this on, and that's why the park's named for Jim Freeman. In the late 50s, probably 56, 57, 58, the city started hauling just thousands of truckloads of topsoil to cover the garbage. I remember when that was going on, we said, yeah, that's not going to work. They could never cover that up. We'll always know that's a dump. Well, I love this park. I don't remember the day that was a dump. It's just one of the most beautiful spaces in the city along the river. What a great thing to do for the environment in the city to build this park along the river. This is Willow Creek that comes through here, and of course goes behind the Willow Creek building that is over there. I just love to go and walk around Freeman Park. I just think it's so beautiful. If you walk around this path, clear around, that's half a mile, and 2 times around is a mile. So I do that sometimes, and of course then it hooks on down the end to the green belt. I'm just amazed that not only the city, but of course the clubs in the area that have financed the green belt, the Kiwanis and the Rotary, that have done so much to finance all this. This is a little path that leads right behind us, in the building right behind us, and back out to the river. That's a cute little place to stroll, although I was scared once because there were people camped down in there, and I don't know. I was alone. But anyway, I love Freeman Park. The city also has a program where you can buy a park bench and dedicate it to someone that you love or whatever. My husband's family bought this for his parents, and there's a little plaque down here with their names on it. Dennis picked this out for the bench because his mother was still alive when we got the bench, and he wanted her to be able to sit there and watch people walk by on the road and watch the river go by. And she did a couple of times before she died in 2008. So, yeah, that's a favorite place of our family. We go there a lot for picnics and things. And we can't leave there without remembering the Vietnam Memorial. This was really a great place. The state legislature approved that the State of Idaho Vietnam Memorial be located in Idaho Falls. In 1990, the monument was dedicated and is now owned and maintained by the city. The monument honors 251 Idahoans who were lost in the Vietnam War. If you ever get a chance on Memorial Day, walk through the Field of Honor. What a great thing that is. The veterans and probably the cities involved plants 1,000 flags. You can see the Vietnam Memorial down at the end. And it's just, you have to go Memorial Day weekend or it's gone. It's gone Monday morning or the next morning after Memorial Day. But it's very worthwhile to see that. The next final park we're going to talk about
So
is...
can I ask a question? What about the trees that are like people will put things on?
Oh yeah, you can also get a tree.
Do you have to buy those?
I think you probably do. We've never looked into that, so I don't know that.
How much are they?
I have no idea. Well, the
You
bench
buy
was
it,
about
they
$400, but that was back in the early 2000s.
No, but the trees that have little memorial stuff on.
Yeah, you buy the tree, the city will plant it and take care of it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we'll talk in just a minute as soon as I tell you about the final historic park. We all talked about this a couple of weeks ago with the Sister City program, that this park to me is a really special place. And in my day, we called it Sportsman's Park, and I'll tell you why. It used to look like this in 1890. There was the river around this island, and the only way to get across it was on the railroad bridge. Well, in 1900, these little houses on the island were houses of ill repute. So here's where the village improvement ladies came to action again. I've done a lot of research about both these ladies. This Alice Boomer was the secretary of the VIS for a while, and she really helped a lot. These ladies, here's where they wanted to secure the morals of the city. So they went out and they talked these poor ladies on the island to come and live somewhere where it's safer, and they started to clean it up. And of course, as you can tell, that would be quite an undertaking. I imagine that's kind of what Cape Curley Park looked like, this rocky, dirty, ugly place that would be like an impossible task. But in the 1920s, the Sportsman's Association was organized in Bonneville County, and their goal was to use that island and call it Sportsman's Park to highlight local wildlife and to conserve fish and game, to promote fish and game conservation on this island. So the first thing they had to do was put in this swinging bridge. If any of you have ever been around when the swinging bridge was there, it was famous. We all loved it. Although if you go out on the bridge as a young girl, any boy on there is jumping around and you feel like you're going to get tossed over, and the girls are screaming and the boys are laughing. This woman on the bridge is my husband's aunt, Louise Molloy. The picture was taken in the 1940s, but the bridge was put in, I think, in about the late 20s to early 30s, so that they could get access to the island. They didn't have any access to the island except across the railroad bridge. So everybody in town loved the swinging bridge. There's a picture of Louise's husband, Jim Molloy, on the bridge, and there's some local books that have other people on the bridge as well. This man's name is Peter Pedersen. I think that's the Danish pronunciation. It's spelled with D's, but I think in English we'd say Peterson, but some people continue to call it Pedersen. Pedersen Sportsman's Park. But his son, Eddie, was later the mayor of the city, and he was also involved in the Sportsman's Park with the Sportsman's organization. And we all call him Eddie Peterson. I don't know. Some people call him Pedersen, so doesn't matter. Anyway, they put up this sign. Here's the bridge, as you can see underneath here, and they put up the sign to visit Sportsman's Park. They had trout ponds, wild ducks, that meant little cages with ducks in them. Native shrubs, which I think meant sagebrush and scrubble. Fancy birds meant they had some pheasants in cages. They were raising pheasants to plant them in farms. Okay, this trout ponds is what's really interesting. They constructed concrete fish runs on the island, and that's when it became known as Sportsman's Park. Here's a historic picture of the fish runs. So up here is the Broadway Bridge and the 5 fish runs, and then in the middle there was a concrete structure where they had adult trout where they were spawning these trout. And these fish runs had little fingerling trout that they planted in lakes and streams in the area. And then there were 3 fish runs on this end next to the railroad bridge. Just notice these 3 right here. I'll show you in a minute where you can see them today. Amazingly, some of it's still visible today. They later took out the runs closer to us and just had the 3. That's all I remember back in the day. This is a historical picture. It's obviously at least in the 30s. The temple wasn't built until the 40s. So this is the flat area where okay, here's the swinging bridge. Today there's another bridge there. Yeah, the Teton Dam flood took that bridge out. There's this flat area now that's still there that has trees, lots of trees, and a picnic area. And then you go down the hill into the Friendship Garden now, and that's where these fish runs were, and there's the end of them there. There's a colorized picture of it. It's an early postcard. It's a little bit romanticized, I think, but again, the temple's not in the picture, so it was in the 30s. And they had this, it says their information bureau, but they also called it a museum. The man in the doorway is one of the Kiefer twins. The Kiefer twins were born in the 1880s in Eagle Rock. It was a big deal to have any baby in Eagle Rock, but to have twins was amazing. And these guys were quite the characters around town. One of them was a sheriff for a while, but when I was a girl, they were still wearing their cowboy chaps around town and a gun on their hips, and they were quite the characters to see around town. They had a taxidermy menagerie inside this building. You could go in the building, all around the walls, everywhere, there was all this taxidermy and skins. Down the center of the room, they had glass cases that were, I remember it was very dusty. My husband doesn't remember that, but I was a girl. Inside the cases were things like fish skins and bones and all kinds of artifacts and Indian arrowheads that they found in the area. So they were quite the characters, and in the Museum of Idaho now they have a Kiefer room, I think. Maybe they still do. Since they remodeled it, I'm not sure. But so this is where the upper deck is today, and I think some of this wall is there. You can see what I mean when I show you the picture in a minute. So now they call it Friendship Garden at Patterson Park. And I didn't see any signage that said Sportsman's Park anymore. My generation, that's all we know. You know where we're talking about when we say Sportsman's Park. But I couldn't find signage like that, and I went into the park and there were some city workers, and I said, "Don't you guys call this place Sportsman's Park anymore?" And one of them said, "Oh yes, it's Patterson Sportsman's Park." But there's no signage, so I don't know what's up with that. But the Japanese Friendship Garden is one of the most beautiful places you'll ever want to see. There's the bridge that crosses now instead of the swinging bridge. And you go over into the park, and of course there's that beautiful pavilion that we heard about last week. I'm just about done, so it's amazing if you go on their website and look and see what they put into this. 4 or 5 years of work to get it the way it is today is absolutely a monumental task. It's just beautiful, and the slate roof that they put on there is also authentic Japanese. You go inside and you can sit inside, there's little seats you can sit, and the falls comes down right here. And you can sit there and watch the falls come down right in that pavilion. What a wonderful contribution to this community. And there's the granite lantern that we saw a couple of weeks ago and a close-up of it. And as we were told, there was another mate across the river that was vandalized, and the city put in this smaller little lantern. And this garden gate has quite a story behind it with the big pillars and all these cross beams. They had to hand chisel that. That was a big undertaking to construct that as well. I hope you've had these stories about this in this FFL. I probably missed it because I just joined recently. But you walk down through the garden and it is one of the most beautiful places and tranquil, lovely places you'll ever want to see. Here is the remnants of the fish pond. Just along this side you can see where that fish pond used to be, and it's in the same footprint. I'm told that's what the original Sportsman's Park fish pond, the adult fish pond was. And then you come through there and up onto this lower deck, and of course it's right below the Taylor Bridge, which I love that. And you come around to the end, and this is what you'll see. At the end, if you come off this deck, walk around here, over to here, and you'll see the remnants of those fish runs that are still there. I think it's great that they built that deck so you can still see those. Here's the upper deck, and this is what I meant by, I think it might have been part of the museum walls. This right here looks like it might have been, and they say it was in that location, so I'm going with them. Doesn't the city have some beautiful spaces for us? I'm so grateful for it. I love to walk in the parks and take advantage of the walks around the river. And for all these beautiful parks in the city, you now know the history of at least 5 of them. So, thank you very much.
Wait for the green light to come on. Do any of you have questions for Connie?
Yes, please.
Can you tell us anything about Tautphaus Park? I understand there were prisoners of war there during World War II.
We're prisoners of war there. I believe it's in Jim Bennett's history. I don't have it on the top of my head. I think they were German prisoners of war, but I'm not sure. I know there were some over where the West Bank is too. But
The big long barn was part of their barracks, I've heard reliably. So near the tennis courts, the prisoners of war built that, stayed in it, and they built some other things around.
right, and they helped in the potato fields and farming around the area too. Any other questions or comments? Yes. Hi, your name?
The person who just spoke is the architect and designer of the shop.
The pavilion.
And he also the garden.
Does anybody know who he is?
Yeah, we owe a lot to you. Thank you for that. It's a fabulous place. I just love going there, and I think people in the community would really appreciate it, especially once they go and take advantage of what's there.
The FFL is scheduling a class for next spring on the garden.
Good.
And whatever else I feel like talking about,
Yeah.
after I buy and read your book.
I love to hear your history. I'm looking forward to that, because I just know very little and just what I've researched offline. So.
One more thing about the friendship garden. The master gardeners take care of it now. It's not just the master gardeners, but they're a big group that has it. The sister cities are doing
Right.
a lot of different businesses in the community will come to a big project like stadium decks,
Right.
building decks.
There are just hundreds of volunteer hours that goes into that garden. It is absolutely unbelievable to see what all you wonderful volunteers have done for the community. So,
And every so often, the garden is vandalized by young people who
Yeah.
don't know the history of
yeah,
Idaho.
yeah, that's for sure.
We have people that take whole plants out.
Well, they really had to landscape a lot to bring all the rocks in where they are. That just didn't happen, you know. It took. You go there and you're just amazed at the tons of work that took. If you read online the website that the sister cities have, and read the blogs and how all those things came to be, it's pretty incredible. what a lot of you have done. Yes,
Why was Taylor Bridge?
sorry?
Taylor Bridge?
Yeah.
When and why was that?
When the Taylor Bridge was built in 1868 by Matt Taylor, they wanted to have a place for wagons to cross the river. Did you know that's the first bridge that ever was built across the Snake River?
The one behind it is a railroad bridge?
Oh, the railroad bridge was built in 1879 when the railroad got here.
So the Taylor Bridge was built first.
Oh, yes, much earlier. For a while, the only way to get across the river was to ford it. And that was very dangerous. Imagine trying to ford that monstrous river. Where they used to ford was up there where Eagle Rock is actually, where the Eagle Rock wagons crossed. What do you call that? Not the toll bridge, but a ferry. There was a ferry 9 miles up the river. If you start at the Shiloh Drive, 9 miles up the river, right there was where they had the ferry. And when Matt Taylor was a freighter, and he'd come through, and he'd have to wait forever to get across on the ferry, and it was dangerous, especially in the spring. There was too much water, and he camped down there by the river where the bridge is now, and he thought, hey, this would be a great place for a bridge. And so he got some partners, and they built that bridge in 1866 and opened it. And everybody came to that, and so they closed the ferry. But we went up there once, and you can still see some of the rocks where the wagons went down. There's still wagon tracks there. Again, you'd be trespassing on a private farmer's land. And they used to have a monument there, but I think it's been vandalized to the point where it's not there anymore. I do have some pictures of it, where the ferry was.
But this bridge is not the original.
It's a replica that was built probably in 1990, something like that. Yeah, they wanted to know where the first bridge was and to make that a historical point in the city.
They built the first bridge right there. It's about roughly like that, except it was wood.
Yeah, this is
In
metal.
1900, what's his name? The guy builds everything. Built a steel bridge there.
Right.
And that was on the rock footings that you see. If you could see them in this picture, you can still see the rock footings
Right,
from the riverside of the original footings for that 1900 bridge.
right.
And in that area would have been stone cribbing, looked like a log cabin full of stones.
Yeah.
And that's what they put the original wood bridge on.
The problem with the toll bridge was that the state legislature outlawed it, that they had to let people cross free, so that kind of put a damper in the toll bridge in the early 1890s. And so then the bridge was open to everybody, and so they built a bigger, more substantial bridge there. Okay, we've got a whole nother subject for discussion another time. One more question?
So the Broadway Bridge, when was that built, and what is the history of the Broadway Bridge?
Yeah, that's information that I've researched, but I don't have in my head, that it was there when I was a girl, so it's pretty old.
There was a steel bridge at this location.
Right.
In 1900, and I think Broadway was built in roughly 1920 or
I think that sounds right.
something like that.
Yeah, I don't have that information on the top of my head. Well, thank you for coming today. I hope you enjoy the city parks and spaces that so many volunteers have.